Well, hello, this is Dr. Stockdale. This is EDU 202, and I'm making this video to kind of review what we were supposed to do for our week 1 in this course. And so you had on the syllabus, you were asked to read chapter 1 in our course text. And this was a lot of history about various people who influenced early childhood education. And then you were to write up reflections and notes about those readings, as well as you were also supposed to view some Edpuzzle videos. There were 5 of them, and you were to include some of your reflections, your thoughts, your notes about those videos. If you did not, I am going to be somewhat lenient this week as far as the grading. I am taking off points if you didn't complete most of the assignment as I ask you to, but what I'm really looking for is at least 1 page, maybe 1.5 pages, of a summary of each of the readings and viewings. So if that's not what you did this week, then please do that for next week. And remember, when you go to the syllabus, if you will click on the assignment, these assignments have rubrics attached. Here is your rubric for the weekly reflections and notes. I'm going to check your reflective thinking, and that means I want to see you explain your thinking to me. I want to see your notes as far as details and information that have to do with the main ideas of what you read or viewed. I expect you to make connections, and that means you're talking about other courses, your past learning experiences. When you get into your field experience, you're going to want to bring those up. I am going to check for conventions, which means you should be making very few mistakes in capitalization, punctuation, grammar, spelling, and that includes your agreement, verb agreement, pronoun agreement. Conventions entails all of that. And make sure that you submit your work on time, okay? If I go back to week 1, I said that you were to be reading, and then you had Edpuzzle videos. Well, so this coming week, week 2, you again have some reflections and notes that will be due this coming Sunday by midnight. You are to read chapter 10 in our text, which this is going to set us up to better understand curriculum and how to write lesson plans. So take some notes while you're reading and reflect upon those for this assignment of reflections and notes. Then you have an Edpuzzle video, or 2 of them, excuse me. You have a Head Start training video, and you have an early childhood literacy lesson planning video. Now the video that I found for you, because I did not make my own, is very, very close to what we will be using in our classroom. And in fact, if you go over here to lesson plan templates, you should be able to click on that and then click on the lesson plan format with hints, and you'll notice that you're going to need to run this off, and when you type it up, you do not include what it says in italics. So your subject is going to be English language arts, or it may be play, or it could be gross motor, fine motor. We're going to talk about our subjects for Head Start in terms of domains, language and literacy. And I'll go over that more in class. Your grade level, you're going to we're going to literally just put Head Start, or you can use pre-K, pre-kindergarten. We're going to use the South Carolina Early Learning Standards, which if you Google South Carolina Early Learning Standards, you will find a document that has those on it, in it, and you will want to scroll. Actually, I've passed the table of contents, but each of our South Carolina Early Learning Standards is broken up into domains, subdomains, and goals. And so we're going to be looking at the children at Head Start in terms of their learning, from approaches to play and learning, emotional and social development, health and physical development, language development, and communications. And we are not going to, you could use mathematical thinking and expression, cognitive development. So we're going to look at those areas, and in this document, each one of those areas is defined and explained. So part of your job this week is not to necessarily read the South Carolina Early Learning Standards, but get familiar with this, because you are going to be looking for a standard next week, and I'll go over that with you more in detail. So if we go back to Blackboard and we go back to, we're going to go to week 2, you will see that your assignment is to read chapter 10 in our text. Then you've got the Ed Puzzle videos. We've already talked a little bit about that. You've got the Head Start video and the Early Childhood Literacy lesson planning video. And then I've shared a Google document with you that lists our curricula that you are to choose from. You need to decide which of these you're most interested in, and on the Google form that I shared with you, type your name, and it's just first come, first serve. You're going to research this curriculum model, then you're going to present to us, and you are going to be the teacher and teach us about this model. Now, you have 2 weeks to complete this, so please do not wait until the night before or even a few days before, because this is quite a hefty research project. If you go to week 4, you will notice that I have helped you out already, number 1, by giving you at least one website or video to get you started. I expect you to do some of your own research, but once you have researched and read up on your choice of curriculum model, you're going to prepare a PowerPoint, Google Slideshow, or Prezi that highlights the characteristics of each model. You want to answer these questions. Who were the founders or creators? What are the defining characteristics or attributes of the model? When was the curriculum model first implemented? And where did it originate? You also want to explain why this curriculum model was created. Now, I just am realizing a typographical error as I'm speaking, and I'll see about fixing that after I finish this video. You are going to submit your presentation by 5:30 before our class meets, and be ready to teach that night of class. With only 4 people in our class, everyone should be able to do their presentation. So if you want to know when the due date is, it's November 5th. If you want to know how you're going to be graded, you're going to click on the link there, and then you're going to look at the rubric. Now, the rubric tells you in detail what I just mentioned. Who were the founders or creators? What are the defining characteristics or attributes of the model? When was the curriculum model first implemented? Where did it begin or originate? And why was the model created? Then you're also going to be assessed or evaluated on your posture, your eye contact, and your speech. Are you standing up straight? Do you look relaxed and confident? Do you make eye contact with others during the presentation? Do you speak clearly and distinctly all the time and mispronounce no words? Do you seem prepared? And have you obviously rehearsed? What about your attire? Are you in professional looking attire that's appropriate for classroom teaching? You will actually have to dress as a teacher in clothes that you might go to a field experience in to get these points. If you wear jeans, that might be appropriate for dress down Fridays. You will need a prop or some type of realia. Realia are real things, so you have to bring at least one prop that goes along with your curriculum model. And then finally, are you being attentive during others' presentations? While you are presenting, I'll be watching the others in the room to make sure that they're listening to you. When it's someone else's turn to present, I will be watching to see if you are following along. And this assignment is worth 100 points. So let me know if you have any issues with that. Now, I actually moved. You had a lesson plan due. We really need to learn about writing lesson plans before I ask you to try it on your own. But I do want you to read over those South Carolina Early Learning Standards, and I want you to become familiar with the lesson planning template. Now, so we have talked about the lesson planning format. We have talked about the South Carolina Early Learning Standards. We have talked about when our curriculum model research presentation is due and how to find the rubric so that you will earn all your points. Here's another copy of the lesson plan format that you can get on Blackboard. There's also one that I'll share with you that takes away that it's a Google form, and I will make sure that I share this with you so that you have a Google sheet that you can just type on before you turn that in. Now, I want to review a little bit about let me go back to here, excuse me for jumping around, but I do want to review a little bit about some of the people that you may have read about in your, or you should have read about in your readings this week. And I'm only going to really focus on about 5 of them, starting with Martin Luther. Now, Martin Luther was mentioned very briefly in your text, and Martin Luther was a German professor of theology. He was a composer, a priest, and he was a significant figure during the Protestant Reformation, but he rejected several of the teachings and the practices of the Roman Catholic Church. And he really did begin, he was a catalyst in the 16th century for the Protestant Reformation. So Martin Luther saw that the primary role of education was to teach children to read. And the reason why it was important to learn to read was because children needed to read the Bible. So it was considered essential to acquire knowledge of the Bible. Martin Luther also believed that family plays the most important role in educating children, and that communities played a crucial role in ensuring that all children were educated. And therefore, he believed in providing parents with necessary supports. So Luther's impact on education is still seen today because he contributed to the idea that all children should be educated, not just the wealthy. We call that universal education. Education for all is known as universal education. And he also contributed to the view that learning to read is critical. Today we have a broader term for learning to read and under the umbrella of literacy. It's not just reading, it's listening, speaking, reading, writing, viewing, creating. We have a big umbrella of literacy that we use now. But Martin Luther also shaped the idea that parents are the child's first and most important teacher, and that communities play a critical role in early childhood education. Hopefully you also read about John Amos Comenius. He was born in Moravia, and that's now what is called the Czech Republic. But Comenius is known as the father of modern education. He had ideas that picture textbooks should, first of all, textbooks should have pictures, and that they should be written in a child's native language. Most of the books at that time were written in Latin, which was a much more academic language, and if it was someone's second language, it was even more difficult to access. So his first picture book was called Orbis Pictus. He believed that we should teach from simple and move to the complex. He believed in lifelong learning, and that learners needed to focus on logical thinking, not just memorization. Like Luther, Comenius also believed in educating all students, all children. And I'm going to ask you for a minute to pause and think, what was that term? Education for all. If you said universal education, then you're right. It means he believed in educating poor children and women, which at the time, women did not have as many educational opportunities as men. He also believed in practical instruction. So Comenius said that education should begin in the early years in order for children to fulfill God's or humans' godlike image. He believed that children have a timetable for growth and that knowledge should be presented based on readiness. He thought that the senses provide children with the means of acquiring sensory information, and therefore all education should be sensory. We've already talked a little bit about picture books. His picture books provided opportunities to teach children the names and concepts of objects. So we know that he developed the first picture book, and it provided a complement to the development of literacy, and he emphasized sensory training, which is still a very foundational practice within early childhood education. Let's move on and talk about John Locke a little bit. John Locke was an English philosopher. He was also a physician, and he is considered one of the most influential thinkers of the Enlightenment period. And this was an intellectual and scholarly movement, if you will, a philosophical movement, and it dominated the world of ideas in Europe during the 18th century. Locke believed that the environment determined children's development and ultimately who the child would become. He termed the phrase tabula rasa, which means blank slates. And he believed that children are blank slates and that the environment fills them with knowledge. He also believed that the quality of the environment impacted the quality of the children's learning and development. So we still feel Locke's impact on education today because he contributed to the idea that early education is a means for compensating for an impoverished environment, a way for helping balance or bring up the make up for the poor or the lack of advantage for certain children. He emphasized the role of environmental activities and design in children's success, and he also contributed to the view that a well-developed sensory environment is essential. Next, I want to talk to you about Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was French, and he wrote a book called Emile, or On Education, and this book caused quite a stir in France and Switzerland, but it served as an inspiration for a whole new system of education, really. Now, Jean-Jacques Rousseau was influenced by John Locke, and so in his book, one of the main character, Emile, in Emile, Rousseau discusses his philosophy of education, and even though Emile is a fiction text, when people read it, they applied it to education, and like I said, it caused quite a stir. But Rousseau describes how to create an education that nurtures the natural goodness of man. We call that naturalism. So he believed that children should be encouraged to develop their own strengths. He believed in an environment that did not interfere or restrict that natural natural education. He believed that if children were happy, if they were allowed to be spontaneous and inquisitive, that over time, as they developed, they would learn what they needed to learn, but they would do it on their own timetable, their innate timetable. Rousseau termed this as unfolding, and his idea expressed in Emile was of natural education. So we still feel his impact today because of the idea of readiness, that we should allow children to be ready for skills and knowledge and not present them information and instruction on a level at which they haven't reached yet. That we still feel Rousseau's impact because we want to have children working on their own timetables as far as learning skills. Rousseau also believed in supporting the children's social and emotional development, which is a huge part of the early childhood education curriculum. And he provided the belief that children should be the center of the education curriculum, not the teacher. Student-directed, student-centered learning is where we feel Rousseau the most. still today. And last but not least, I'm going to talk to you about Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi. And Pestalozzi was from Switzerland, and he also advocated for education of the poor. He emphasized teaching methods that were designed to strengthen the student's own abilities. Now, if you think about how revolutionary this is, education was not, at that time, was not about looking at the student's own abilities. It was getting students where they needed to be despite where they were at the time. He believed, Pestalozzi believed that instruction should progress from familiar to new, and he modeled his curriculum after a meal in Rousseau's book. He believed in focusing on group recitation and grouping students by ability levels. He believed in participation activities, and his ideas were really radical for this time. So one of the reasons why we still talk about Pestalozzi today is because he talked about students' individual differences. So Pestalozzi believed that education should follow the children's nature and that mothers are children's most important teachers. He believed that formal education within a school is needed to integrate knowledge of home life, vocational education, and reading and writing. So he believed in integration, didn't he? He believed that all education is sensory, and he used object lessons that focused on learning. So he was one of the first philosophers, educators, to use manipulatives as a teaching tool. And we still know today that they're a very critical tool in early childhood education. And he saw the teacher's role as one that should focus on teaching the children and not particular subjects such as reading and math. And I've already talked about this a little bit, but Pestalozzi's impact today is felt because he believed that family is the child's first and most important educator. He believed that educating the parents as well as teachers on how to support children's development. And he believed that children developed on a natural timetable and that the environment is an essential facet of the educational process. And with that, I'm going to stop with the slideshow presentation because I've been talking a long time. Let me see if I can go back to, so again, week 2, you need to read chapter 10, write up reflections and notes, watch your Ed Puzzle videos, write up those reflections and notes, sign up for the curriculum research, look over the lesson plan template, and look up the South Carolina Early Learning Standards and be familiarizing yourself with those for our lesson plans. And just know that we are going to we're going to begin this week talking about quality curriculum and how to make sure that you have all of the essential parts in your lesson plans. So without further ado, I am going to end the video and just expect you to call me, text me, email me, let me know if you have any questions or concerns, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. Take care. Bye-bye.